Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's just jump right into it. Today, we're doing a full-on masterclass. We are going to bridge the gap between what sounds like, fantastical elemental magic and the very real hard sciences of thermodynamics and atomic physics. We're unpacking a really fascinating framework that breaks down the element of fire, and we're not just looking at it as some destructive force, but as a deeply complex physical and emotional system. Seriously, by the time we wrap this up, you're going to see heat transfer, atomic movement, and the whole concept of elemental gates in a completely new light.
Here is our syllabus for today. We've got the physics of heat flow, the four flames of fire, light side versus dark side, triggering ignition with pressure, connecting subdomains, and we'll cap it all off with perpetual energy loops. Let's get to it. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the physics of heat flow.
So, to truly understand fire, we've got to start with the absolute basics of how heat behaves. Everything really boils down to one simple rule. Every single object with mass converts some of its internal energy into heat. And heat is restless. It actively seeks to move from areas where it's super concentrated to areas where it's less concentrated. It is always trying to move from hotter bodies to colder bodies. And you can see how this heat flow totally alters the physical state of matter. Just think about water for a second. When the surrounding temperature is higher than the water, heat flows into it. The more heat that flows in, the more fluid that water becomes, until it literally vaporizes. But if we flip that scenario, say the surrounding air is cooler than the water, well then the heat actively tries to escape into the environment. And as that heat escapes, the water loses its fluidity, it gets rigid, and eventually it freezes solid into ice. That right there is your baseline thermodynamic reaction.
Now, the really crucial point here is what's actually happening under the hood at a microscopic level during these transitions. The source material defines this as atomic agitation. When heat is applied, atoms and molecules get agitated. They start vibrating and moving way faster than usual. This accelerated movement is the literal mechanical fuel for physical transitions. I mean, it's the exact reason why warm food decays so much faster than cold food, or why heated liquids start bubbling up as the atoms frantically try to escape into the air. And this fundamental law of physics, it seamlessly leads us right into how elemental fire is categorized.
Moving right along to Section 2, the four flames of fire.
Okay, so here we're shifting from pure physics into a theoretical framework where fire isn't just one giant monolithic element. Actually, the mastery of fire is divided into highly specific, purpose-driven categories. In this system, there are exactly four major categories of flame. And they aren't just ranked by how hot they burn. No, they're distinguished by unique color, a core physical trait, and a really specific emotional property.
This breakdown brilliantly illustrates just how complex the element is. These core traits act as a practical guide for students trying to balance these four elemental forces. First up, we have the crimson fire. Its core trait is vitality, specifically warmth. It's that perfect balance between heat and cold that literally sustains life. It's the warmth circulating in our blood, and emotionally, it's tied to passing on your will or your legacy. Then, skipping down a bit, we have the golden blaze of purification. This one mixes light and fire to refine ordinary stuff into something extraordinary. Like if you apply it to raw earthen ores, it actually transforms them into precious metals. It also has these amazing healing properties, acting like the light of the sun to identify a physical debilitation and moderate it.
But let's rewind to our physics lesson for just a second. Remember atomic agitation? Well, that is the specific domain of our second category, the blue flame of fortitude. It's completely earned its nickname as the catalyst flame because it mechanically fuels physical transition. When this specific heat agitates atoms while wind is present, a gentle breeze turns into an absolute storm. It triggers evaporation to start the rain cycle. It lightens gases so things can float. It creates pure propulsion. It is literally the engine of change in the physical world.
Which brings us to Section 3, light side versus dark side elements.
Since we know these elements have such specific functional and emotional traits, we really have to talk about the duality here. There's this incredibly delicate balance between creation and destruction in thermodynamics. Every element can create or destroy, but they fall into categories based on their dominant nature. Light side elements are elements of generation. They heal, they give, and they sustain life. Think back to the crimson fire and the golden blaze. On the flip side, dark side elements are elements of destruction. They simply take life and destroy. And the physics of this duality are super strict. Brightness and darkness are completely antithetical. They cannot occupy the same physical space at the same time, period.
Because of that rule, the generation of the golden blaze will actively nullify the destruction of the black inferno. To really grasp what the black inferno of destruction is all about, there's this fascinating line from the source material. When negativity is predominantly focused into the development of a sigil, it transforms into a cursed weapon with the ability to inflict debilitating stats upon its user. The Black Inferno is born entirely out of unrestrained, undisciplined, chaotic heat. It plays by no rules, and it has no allies. It's actually so chaotic that it will actively harm the very person trying to wield it. It is the exact opposite of the moderate, controlled refinement we saw with the Golden Blaze.
All right, let's get hands-on. Section 4. Triggering ignition with pressure.
We've talked a lot of theory, but how do you actually unlock the elemental gate of fire? How do you physically birth fire in a space? Well, the clue is actually hidden right in the linguistics. The English word ignite comes from the Latin root ignis, and ignis specifically denotes the birth of fire in response to an action. We're talking friction, conflict, or intense pressure. Fire absolutely requires a precipitating action. Just like pressure naturally builds up inside the atoms of water when you set a pan on a hot stove, you have to have that mechanical friction to create the initial spark. So here's my question for you. How do you manually trigger combustion in physical space? If you know you need intense pressure and friction to get that spark, how do you engineer that out of thin air in an empty room? While the source material gives us this absolutely brilliant, scientifically grounded method used by a character named Mitsuki, let's walk through his exact process. Step 1, you have to accumulate immense gravitational force. We're talking harnessing the gravity of the Earth and the Sun themselves. Step 2, you use all that localized gravity to densely pressurize the air in a very specific, confined area. Step 3, because you are packing those atoms so incredibly tight, the pressurized air physically collapses in on itself. That collapse triggers these minute, microscopic atomic explosions. And finally, step 4, those tiny explosions exponentially snowball in magnitude until you officially achieve physical ignition. You literally force manual combustion entirely through applied gravitational pressure. How cool is that?
Now let's scale this up. Section 5. Connecting the elemental subdomains.
Triggering that ignition is an amazing feat on its own, for sure. But true elemental mastery is about sustaining a massive chain reaction. The domain of fire isn't just one isolated room, it's a sequence, an entire architecture. It starts in the air domain because, of course, wind is the prerequisite wave you need to sustain any flame. From there, the flames flow through channels directly into the magma domain, where that immense heat is used to literally liquefy solid rock. That superheated liquid rock then flows right into the metal domain, where it starts to cool, acting just like the golden blaze, to refine the material into precious ores. And finally, the remaining heat enters the electromagnetism domain, where it interacts with a massive, spinning orb of liquid iron. And the climax of this whole sequence is just mind-blowing. You've got this intense heat hitting spinning liquid iron. The heat actively ionizes the iron. At the exact same time, the natural conductivity of the metal magnetizes it. Put that ionization and magnetism together, and it generates a massive, illuminating electromagnetic field. That single initial spark of pressurized air we talked about earlier has cascaded into a fully functioning electromagnetic reactor. And finally, Section 6, creating perpetual energy loops. This right here is the ultimate goal of elemental mastery. It's making the leap from just having some personal magical affinity for fire to becoming a literal engineer of external thermodynamic systems. By linking those air, magma, metal, and electromagnetism subdomains, you loop the energy generation. You've built an automated, closed-loop system. The energy naturally flows through those channels, perpetually filling up a central reservoir, the pool of fire. Once that pool is full, the system is smart enough to just cut off. Then, when the energy drops below a critical threshold, the loop kicks right back on. It is a perfect, infinite cycle. It beautifully mimics the actual physics of a star, using gravitational pressure to sustain a continuous nuclear fusion-like burn.
So I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. We've just seen how bridging the concepts of atomic agitation, category-specific heat traits, and intense gravitational pressure can literally engineer a perpetual, self-sustaining energy loop. If mastering the physics of elemental gates creates this kind of endless energy in theory, what limits could we break if we applied these principles of pressurized refinement and thermodynamic looping to our own reality? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the physics of the world around you, and I'll catch you next time.